Welcome to the Academic Writing Amplified podcast. On this podcast, we believe that the culture of academia needs to change radically. Women and non-binary people are revolutionizing academia within institutions that were not built for us. If you're ready to reject the culture of overwork, kick guilt and overwhelm to the curb, and amplify your voice to make a real impact on your field without breaking down or burning out, you're in the right place. With our team of experienced writing coaches as co-hosts, we'll share insights and talk to inspiring guests to bring you the practical strategies, systems, and mindset shifts you need to find time to write, publish work you love, and design your career on your terms. And it all starts with writing. Let's go. Hello. This is Kathy, and I'm just popping in here before this episode to thank you so much for listening. Now, the next few episodes on the podcast are going to be re-releases of our most popular episode about the post-tenure experience. That's because we're getting ready to enroll our post-tenure, mid-career, even into late career program, which is called Elevate. Now, Elevate is a 6-month program that runs from February to July of 2023. Yes, we enroll early. We want to give you lots of time to find out all the information about the program and decide if it's right for you. Elevate is an application-only program. It's also a program that centers the one-on-one coaching experience. So there's lots of juicy one-on-one calls, there's group calls, and there's also workshops in our Elevate program. On October 5th, 2022, we will be doing an information session live for you where you can come find out all about the program and get any questions answered. So find that link in the show notes where you can register for our live Elevate info session, which is coming up October 5th. As long as you register, you can come live or we'll send you the recording as always. And during that info session, you will get all the information about the program and how to apply. All right, enjoy this re-release mid-career episode. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the podcast. On today's podcast, I brought together 2 of our most amazing Elevate grads who will introduce themselves at the beginning of our interview so that you can hear how and why they enrolled in the Elevate program and the kind of shifts that they made during that program. Now, if you're mid-career and truthfully, even, wherever you are in your career, I really think that you're going to find what they have to say inspiring, especially about the tangible versus intangible results that they had by participating in the Elevate program. A lot of times we think we want to participate in a program because we want to write more stuff, or we want to get this promotion, or we want to do a thing, right? But when you hear both of these Elevate grads talk, you're going to hear how impactful the intangible things that they were able to do for themselves are. So I just am so excited that you get to hear this panel with our 2 Elevate grads. So enjoy this Elevate panel. It has so much to offer anyone who is mid-career, or really anyone who just wants to make an impact with their career. And thank you so much for listening. All right, I'm so excited to have 2 of our Elevate grads with me today. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. I'll start with Sonia since you're first on my camera. So could you please introduce yourself to the podcast listeners?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm Sonia Cabell. I'm an associate professor of reading education with tenure in the School of Teacher Education and in the Florida Center for Reading Research at Florida State University. Yeah, celebration, because that associate professor with tenure was a new designation change for me. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Thank you. And Debra, could you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Hi, I'm Debbie Gombert, and I am also really glad to be here. I am in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I teach at Eastern Michigan University. I am also an associate professor, although I became I earned tenure before getting my PhD. So I am also now Dr. Gombert, which is a big deal to me.
Yay!
That was not the first, that was the secondary thing to earning tenure. I teach in music therapy.
Thank you so much. Yes. Awesome. Okay. So I would like to start by talking about like what your career looked like before you joined Elevate. So leading up to the question of why you joined, but maybe Debbie, if you could start by just painting a little bit of a picture of what things were like for you that led you to the Elevate program.
So this is where context always makes such a big difference, right? I finished my PhD in February 2020. If you look back at your calendar, what was happening in February of 2020, it was February 25th, 2020. And I had a week off then and I went to a conference and then boom, everything shut down. Wow. So I joined Elevate. What was going on for me was I'd had a summer of, after being in whatever kind of shutdown and lockdown one is in while one is working on a PhD, I then went into a government imposed shutdown and lockdown because of COVID. So I was also on sabbatical then in that fall. So I was looking at needing balance, needing to figure out how to emerge from the process of first earning tenure and then completing my PhD, figure out how to regain balance in my life amidst being on sabbatical during COVID. So I didn't realize at the time that I signed up that a big part of what I was needing was community.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Okay.
So there's the picture.
Yeah. And I always think of that summer 2020 cohort as like the people who had this real, true, like faith in themselves, like a real belief of like, I'm going to invest all of this time and money in this program when the world is like collapsing around me. I just think it's like a very special group of people who like made that decision. But yes, so I was very happy that you did. Sonia, could you tell us a little bit about like what things were like before you joined Elevate?
I was an Elevate cohort spring of 2021, and I was in the process of tenure and promotion. But before this time, I graduated with my PhD in reading education in 2009. And I took on a research-focused non-tenure track role for many, many years until 2017. So what some others would consider a non-traditional path, but from listening to your podcast and talking with you, I see it as a strength that I had all of that research experience. Before coming to Elevate, I had already had kind of my mid-career crisis of like, what do I want to be when I grow up? Mm-hmm. So I knew what I wanted to do when I came to Florida State University as an assistant professor. I was very focused and I felt like I was in a place where I could fully complete the mission. And I feel like I met you a long time before I met you because I started listening to your podcasts when they first came out. I feel like it was 2018 or early 2019.
Early 2019. We are going to be 2 years old very soon.
Yeah. So I feel like when I came to Elevate, I feel like I had a lot of the basic pieces that I had been working on. And I also had enrolled in Navigate. So I had a lot of those pieces in place, but then Elevate truly helped me think in a bigger way about my career.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. So two things you have mentioned, right? Debbie mentioned community and kind of looking for community. And Sonia mentioned thinking in a bigger way, about the career. So let me kind of move to like, what was either your favorite part of the program or what was most impactful for you? Debbie, do you want to start? I don't know if you had a hand raised there.
Yeah. So and this is related, I think, to what was most impactful. And Sonia, you said something about what do I want to be when I grow up? And sort of that being a midterm career question. And my internal response was, wait a minute, I'm not done asking that question. And I think what shifted for me during this program was that I stopped looking for that answer to what do I want to be and stopped feeling like it was a mere mid-career or after PhD or whatever question, sort of shifting to feeling like it's a constantly evolving question. And so I think I gained some answers to that question, but I also gained some peace around it being there.
Yeah.
I gained some peace around that question. that desire to know and that desire to pin it down. So I can say more about it later, but I think that was one of the biggest impacts to me, was feeling at peace with that question.
Yeah, that's very powerful, right? Because I think that part of, and both of you, right, are in like North American university context of the tenure system. And I think a lot of times when we're pre-tenure, we feel like, well, tenure is like the end, or like, it's like some big change is going to happen just by getting tenure. And when you realize, you go through that and then you realize, wait, unless I change myself, nothing big is going to change just from the fact of having this new title or having the tenure status. It feels almost like, wait, a bait and switch. Like I thought I was going to be like done somehow, like at tenure. And now I'm like, wait, I have 20 years. So I think it's very powerful to see that, asking that question, like as a practice, right? Like that you continually do like throughout the career. Sonia, what was the most impactful thing for you about Elevate?
There were several impactful things, but I'll stick with the most impactful, and maybe we can touch on some of the other ones later. But I think that this bigger picture thinking on both my strengths and my career was really important for me, and it really kind of crystallized for me. You know, one of the things that we talked about was core values. We talked about zones of genius, and we talked about leaning into your strengths, and that I really grabbed a hold of the idea that people distinguish themselves by doing what they do best and then doing it as well as they can do it. It's good at, being the best at what they can do, leaning into your strength. And so I loved that, unapologetically understanding your strengths and leaning into those. And then also for me, the 5-year plan was just an extension of that thinking about your mission, your core values, zones of genius. And then the 5-year plan for me, I remember that it all crystallized in Chuck E. Cheese, of all places. While my child was running around playing games, I was writing down my 5-year plan, and I still have it on my little handwritten paper of, okay, this makes complete sense to me. And my goal was not, I want to make full professor. I feel like that's a byproduct of the impact I want to have. My goal was about the impact that I want to have, or the ways that I want to change myself in 5 years. So those, I feel like that was really profound for me, putting together both my strengths, my values as a whole person, developing a plan that I felt really good about.
Yeah. Debbie, you got excited about zones of genius in a couple places there. Do you want to add something?
I had forgotten I'd forgotten about that piece. And yet I got so fired up about that piece. And I think that I'd forgotten about it because I've so integrated the ideas of that. And Sonia, I agree that that sort of just was part of the whole mission and value statement. I was nodding a lot. I realized that people who are just listening can't see that, but I was nodding a lot as you were talking, because for me, the mission was the key piece of the whole thing. Looking at the zones of genius, looking at not just what am I good at, but that piece of what am I bringing to the party that nobody else is bringing.
Yeah.
And it felt like every other aspect of the program built on the zones of genius and my mission, so that wherever I find myself, however that question gets phrased, whatever happens to the university because of COVID or any other catastrophe, who am I and what is my mission and what's that core piece? So it felt like all the other pieces then were different lenses, different ways to look at the mission. Like it was like, okay, here's the central piece. And then everything else was a different lens on that central piece, a different way to look at it, a different way to think about it, a different way to ask how to organize things around it. And I feel like, Kathy, like you approached it in a way that was different from other business types approaches that I've seen. It felt very, very accessible and useful to me.
Great.
I also think that the zone of genius, thinking about your strengths and your insights, those are things that then carry over into anything. I think about how the zone of genius pops up in all aspects of my life, and it always has. It's not dependent upon my current career or profession or the current place where I am. It is really something that I can leverage throughout. So I feel like that was really valuable insights for me.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the big takeaways that we want people to feel after Elevate, that like you are not the container kind of thing, right? Where it's like you are you and you are doing your work through the container of your position at the university. But that is not who you are, right? Like the university and your line, right, is not who you are. You are this person with these desires to make impacts in a certain way, and you will find the impactful way despite your university, right? So that, and I think that's powerful to know, like, because we're so ingrained with that, like, we got to get the job, we got to keep the job. And then maybe there's this like push to get full because you feel like, oh, well, I came this far, I should do it. But I think like Sonia said, like those things are like on the way to doing your impactful work, you'll get full. You know, on the way to these other things that you're driving, those like things that we think we want are going to happen anyway. So, and I think that's really powerful. Yeah. All right. So this isn't on your list of questions, but I wanted to ask what can, yeah, I know, right? A big component of Elevate that's different from other programs that we run is that there's one-on-one coaching in it. So I would love to hear each of you talk about like how you felt in that experience of one-on-one coaching and what you feel like it did for you. You know, and maybe that wasn't the most exciting part. Maybe the group coaching was, or you can talk about that. But I'm kind of interested to hear, because I think that many listeners will never have experienced one-on-one coaching. So I think like, tell us about that. If you were like listening, you're like, well, I don't even know what that's like. Tell us, maybe Debbie, you want to start? Like, what is one-on-one coaching like? How would you describe it to people?
It's interesting because it didn't occur to me that people might not have experienced that. And what I so appreciate about one-on-one coaching is that it's really about somebody being a sounding board and hearing what I'm trying to get to and what I'm saying, and helping me hear my own voice rather than pointing me in a direction that they think I should be going in. So it really feels like an amplification of what I should be doing, an amplification of what I want to be doing. Recognize that and then help me see how I might implement it. And so the coach doesn't have the answers. The coach helps me see what my questions are, what my hopes are, what my thoughts around the issue are, and helps me find the resources then. So it feels very, very different from what you might expect from a teacher who is going to give you information. A coach, I feel like, is more of a guide. And you bring the questions to the coach. The coach doesn't know where they're going to be guiding you until you say, oh, but this is what I'm interested in. So yeah, I think coaching relationships are phenomenal. And we had the opportunity to be coached by a few different people. And I picked my coach and I just stuck with her because I really liked having that one person, you know, sort of like knowing what to expect and knowing her style. And I can see tremendous value in using different coaches. But, you know, it's the way I chose to use it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I thought the coaching was probably my favorite part, the one-on-one coaching. It's where I had my most profound insights because of the coaching. I had experiences with you, Kathy, with Gina, and with Rocio. And I felt like each coach was an amazing listener who then took what I said and reflected it back to me with thoughtful questions that made me think deeper or showed me where my thinking was going in a certain direction that I wasn't even noticing. Let me give you an example of that. Something that was going on at the same time as I was doing Elevate was that my career was shifting, where I was now being invited to do more and more, invited a keynote or a presentation, you know, invited for different things. Whereas before I hadn't been invited to all these things. So all of a sudden I was making it feel like there was a shift in my career. And actually, Kathy, it was you who gave me the insight that I was still operating in scarcity mode. And now I had thought I had left scarcity mode behind me, because I always thought of scarcity as being those things like, you know, when someone asked you to review an article or those things in the beginning that now they're so overly abundant that you're like, please ask someone else, you know, but I was still operating in scarcity mode with these new things that if I didn't say yes to these new things, then maybe nobody will ask me again. And so that fear, letting go of, and I'm still working on letting go of that, and really saying yes to the things that I know that I can make an impact, and it would be a very good fit, that I could deliver what would help them and be in line with my mission. So that was really profound. I think the coaching was extremely unique feature of this program that was very valuable to me.
Great. No, thank you for saying that. Yeah, like I love that both of you really articulated the difference between coaching and teaching, right? And even between maybe coaching and mentoring, right? Because even when you're a mentor, like anybody who's in mid-career has mentored students in different ways and probably for a long time, right? And it's different. Like your mentoring is almost like one-on-one teaching a lot of the time. And coaching is really different. Coaching is really that, like you said, about reflecting back what you're saying and asking more questions. And that's where those impactful insights like can happen. And one of the reasons that we keep the one-on-one coaching monthly in the Elevate program is because we want people to kind of move fast. And by move fast, I mean like have insights and be able to build on those insights while they're in like the 6 months of the program so that they can see themselves changing, which I think is really important for people who do programs like this, because really like, right, you come in because you want to change something. That's the reason or one of the reasons, right, that people take a program like this. Okay. So what almost made you not join? What gave you a moment of hesitancy when you were like, oh, do I want to do this or not? Yeah. Go ahead, Debbie. Go ahead.
Kathy said, go ahead, because I was making the hand motion of money because I was, I really want to spend this money. And I think the shift for me, and this really represented the shift that what I got out of the program, but the shift for me was that I was spending that money on me, not spending that money on being a professor or spending that money on my career or spending that money on my job. So it really felt like, I think when I shifted it to an investment in me, that it really shifted for me. Sort of just looking at how was I going to spend that money? Oh, am I spending that? I'm spending that money on me. Got it. Yes, I can spend that money on me rather than spending that money on career advancement, which on some level felt like somebody else should be paying for it. The university should be paying for it, or somebody else should be paying for my personal career development. But then once I made it about me, yeah, I was willing to pay that money. So that was the shift for me, I think.
I love that. I love that investment in yourself, right? Because at the end of the day, like we were saying before, right? It's you. It's not the position. It's not the university. It's not the line. It's you. So, and I think that I would just like to tell all the listeners that they should just go ahead and invest in themselves in whatever big or small ways are right for you, because you're worth it. And that you can hear, right, in Debbie's voice, like how things change, worth it. But sometimes I think it's hard, especially for women, right, to invest in themselves because they can think of all the ways that they can spend the money on other people. I could hire a grad student. I could do all these other things, but you're going to have, first of all, just a change in yourself is worth it. But also when you change yourself, right, you are also affecting other people around you too. So Sonia, for you, what was something that made you that gave you pause?
Okay. I can't say that I had much pause because I knew I wanted to do this. But the thing that could have stopped me is thinking about the time investment. I was already felt like I was overly busy and also emotionally drained from the pandemic. And so I felt like maybe this isn't the best time to do this. Maybe I should join a future cohort. But then when I thought about timing, it's like there is never a best time for anything. And also, this will be a good use of time, and this will also help me get my time under control. So I felt like I couldn't afford not to engage in an opportunity like this. I'm a strong believer that coaching and professional development and getting help from others and mentorship from others is necessary for like all areas of life.
Yeah.
So I feel like time could potentially be a barrier, but I would encourage people not to let time be a barrier.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think if COVID taught us anything, it's that like anything could happen. So like, let's start now because you don't know, what's coming down the road. Okay. I'm going to ask my last question and I'll just open it if anything else you want to share with people. Who would you recommend Elevate for? Like somebody who's listening and they're thinking about the program, who would you recommend the program for? Debbie, you can go first.
That was the one question that I didn't really come up with other answers to. It seemed like I mean, I joined it because it was a post-tenure program and I really wanted support in looking at what's next for me and looking at what's next because the paths are not as clear. And I wanted some sense of what those paths were. So I wanted that support, that question of what's next. So I don't know if that really answers your question, Kathy, but that's where I was.
Well, I think people who are thinking that, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Here I am. What's next? So, okay. Sonia, what do you think about, like, who would you recommend the program for?
I would recommend it for anybody, even if you're going through the tenure promotion process. That's the timing I did it at, and I thought it was a great timing. I would recommend it for anybody at that timing or forward. I would recommend it even if you've been an associate professor for a really long time. I think I would recommend it for full professors that want to think about this, because just because someone's a full professor doesn't mean they have all this stuff figured out about the impact they want to have in their life. And I think it is so individualized due to the different types of coaching. You know, we didn't talk much about the group coaching, but the group coaching was also very impactful, the individual coaching and the different types of workshops that are offered, that people come away with individualized help and insights. And so no matter where they are, I feel like it would be helpful to everybody.
So, like, how are things now? Like we talked about before, right? Before the program. So how are things for you now? Like, give us like an update on, on how things are going.
So I think that really fits in with sort of what the results were. I was expecting, or when I joined the program, I was thinking, okay, at the end, maybe I'll say, I can see this tangible way that I see that I've better balance, or I will have achieved this thing. And the truth is, yes, I'm using my calendar in a more efficient way. And I have 2 publications that are right now, one is being reviewed and the other I'm doing an R&R. And so there have been some tangible results. But for me, the most impactful thing was not those tangible results. And I have a story for this. It's, I was at one point, my university was going through buyouts and some early retirements, and we didn't know even who they were going to be for. And there was a lot of financial concerns. And a friend of mine was asking me what my response was to that. And I said, oh, well, you know, if my program disappears, then I'll do something different. And she said, oh, that would be such a shame after you worked so hard to get tenure and you worked so hard on your PhD. And she was aware that this had just all ended. And I said, no, it wouldn't. No, it'd be okay. And that shift of feeling like, okay, I had this process of getting my PhD and this process of earning tenure, and I learned something in that process. And that process was that process, and what's next is what's next. But that sense of me owning what I had done and me owning what I'm capable of doing, and feeling like, well, okay, so if this venue disappears, I'll find a different venue. And so for me, that was a more significant shift than the fact that my calendar looks a little bit better and that I have these 2 papers. And some of that might have happened otherwise. I'm pretty sure that the shift in my response to that friend would not have happened otherwise. That shift of being able to say, yeah, if my university evaporates tomorrow, I'll find a different venue. And it may not be a different university. But Kathy, when you said that will get full along the way, I thought, well, or maybe not. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, yeah. the university may evaporate. The university system as we know it may radically shift in the next 3 years. And okay, so there was a sense of owning what those pieces are that I own. So that was the most significant shift for me.
Thank you for sharing that story. Sonia.
I wish I could say I had everything down already, but I'm, as always, a work in progress. So I don't think the goal is arriving at something, but rather continuing to improve. And so I think that there are pieces that I always come back to, because right now I'm still feeling out of control like I did earlier this year in many ways. But there are things I keep coming back to, such as creating the ideal week, comparing it with my real week with my ideal week, for example. And there's core basic pieces that I still revisit regularly so that I can shore up those systems. So I know what I need to do. I just need to continue to revisit certain things that maybe I've forgotten and certain things have fallen down. I also appreciate the different kinds of the toolkit of different kinds of things that can help me. So for example, through this program, I appreciated more fully why the write every day method doesn't work for everybody, even though it works for me. I write 5 days a week and I'm very happy with it. I get positive feedback loops in each time that I'm writing, but I understand that if you're not getting positive feedback loops, then you could be counterproductive and actually could be more harmful than good. And so this helps me with also my mentorship of students. I teach a course called Writing for Publication, where I've been able to incorporate some of these ideas as well, and also working with other colleagues in the college. But overall, I think I've grown in my articulation of my values and my mission and my 5-year plan. One hurdle I think that if I can come to grips with, I can make another jump, which is really accepting how long tasks take me so I can predict my own work better. And that goes back to like your second or so podcasts about breaking projects into tasks. And so like going back to those, so I have the tools. And so a lot of it is that mental reframing, the mindset shift that comes with this, that I need to accept that I do things at this rate, and that's okay. I don't need to be my neighbor down the street. I just need to be the best me and improve the things that I can improve and not think that I'm always too slow or I should do this faster. So some of those shoulds, if I can get past some of those shoulds, I feel like that's the next kind of hurdle I want to jump over.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you both for coming today and for spending time talking about Elevate. Any last things you want to mention before we sign off?
I so appreciate, Sonia, that you mentioned it's a work in progress, because I think it feels like you came full circle in that. And I think that the great thing about this community is we're in a community of other people who are in their own space in that work in progress. And so we're all looking at we have similar tools. We have similar ideas about how to attack that work in progress, how to, go about that work.
Awesome.
And I just want to say, I think this program is outstanding because I think it meets people where they are, rather than I didn't have to be a certain way to engage in the program, but rather it helped me where I was. So thank you for that. And I think it can't be said enough that the coaches are all really good.
Yes, they are.
Right. And each one offers different types of insights. And I just wish that I had all the recordings of my calls so that I could kind of go back and revisit, because those insights that I can revisit again and again in my notes are, like I said earlier, profound.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, thank you both for coming. Thank you both for, sharing about Elevate, and just wishing you the best rest of your fall semester. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for spending your valuable time supporting yourself and your writing by listening to this episode. If you like what you heard today, the best way to say thank you is to hop on over to Apple iTunes and write an honest review. The more reviews, the more amazing academic women and non-binary people will find this podcast. So go write one now.